Welcome to the Prophecy Club. We're going to be talking about unmasking paganism in the church. The speaker is going to be Pastor Isaac Gutierrez. He's been speaking out on paganism for 14 years and how paganism actually may be masked, but even present, even in your church. It's actually quite easy to slip into a church. Many of us don't recognize it, and that's why we're putting him on tour, so he can help us to recognize it. And the topics are Satan's plan to destroy Christianity, the cosmic Christ accepted, worldwide persecution, new world religion, Kingdom Now agenda, the runaway bride of Christ, why Bible prophecy is ignored, the evil agenda of the Green Movement, goddess worship, Gnosticism, perversion, interfaith, universalism, apostasy, mysticism, faith and hope for the last days. Now, Isaac, welcome to the Prophecy Club.
Thank you, Stan.
All right, well, first of all, let's find out a little bit about Isaac. Tell us about you and how you got into this.
Well, I'm a son of a preacher. My dad had a church back in 1980 called Miracle Temple in Dallas, Texas, and pretty much I was a pastor's kid. I was the kind to carry his Bible everywhere he went and tell everybody they're going to hell. But as a preacher's kid, my dad was someone I really looked up to. I really admired him until we had members started coming in and we started feeling some things about what was going on with some of the congregation and realized that witchcraft started coming into the church. And I believed a small family of witches that come into our church, Satan had sent them to destroy the ministry because God was really moving in that church. We were seeing signs and wonders, deliverances, people that were possessed of devils get delivered. I mean, it almost seems like Satan goes to the places where he wants to stop the movement of God.
So in your case, you come by understanding and discovering unmasking paganism in the church because you saw it come into your dad's church years ago. You saw it destroy his church. And so is that what set you on this path to discover this paganism, be able to spot it and root it out of churches?
Yes, sir. This is one of the main purposes of it.
Okay, now, if a person doesn't go to church, is it still important that they know about this?
It's very important because even though it's maybe just happening in the church, it's happening worldwide.
Okay, tell us more about how you got into this.
Okay, continue on. As we found out about witchcraft came into the pews, we realized it was a spirit of Jezebel that came to destroy the work of the Lord. And it destroyed the ministry, and not only that, the church no longer exists. The church was torn down. Father gave it to another minister, but he really didn't do anything with it. He kind of sold it to somebody else. After a while, we came to see if the church was still there, and some other house was standing in its place.
So this really hurt you and your family?
It's really devastated us.
How did it affect the whole Gutierrez family?
It affected us because it was almost like, you say a Jezebel comes in and starts enticing the minister or pulling them away. After a while, the family gets right in the middle of it because they're trying to take over. They come, they manipulate, they flatter you, and after a while, they're just bringing in their own agendas. And after a while, slander, gossip, all kinds of, that they start talking about the family and things like that. After a while, you got a church split.
And before long,
pretty much out of the ministry, we went back into the world. We went back and we traveled doing music for most of our life, since I was...
Did very well in music. Matter of fact, won a lot of awards. But the point is if the Jezebel hadn't come in and destroyed the church, your dad would have continued in the ministry. Mm-hmm. And who knows, maybe even perhaps be alive today, at least to have lived longer, do you think?
I think so. And I think that if he would have been able to... The thing about ministry is you have to sit under somebody. You have to submit under somebody. Amen. You have to be trained. And that's the thing. We have a lot of ministers that are going out gun-ho, doing what they want to do, but not submitting under somebody in a covering. Psalm 74, verse 4 says, "Thine enemies roar in the midst of thy congregations. They set up their ensigns for signs. They have cast fire," verse 7, "they have cast fire into thy sanctuary. They have defiled by casting down the dwelling place of thy name to the ground." That pretty much says what happened to that church because witchcraft came in. When we talk about Jezebel, Jezebel will seduce, gains authority in the church and brings flatteries. They rebel against male authority. They use beauty and seduction, and they will lure you to ruin. Here's some of the characteristics you will see. They have strong sexual appeal to gain power over ministers. They like to seduce the shepherds, especially those in leadership. They bring in paganism. They're falsely religious, they distort the Word of God, and they do whatever it takes to get their way. What they also do, they bring a lot of confusion, and people think it's just female. It can also be male. We can be male or female. And they bring gossip, slander. They will turn the people against the church leaders. They want control, and it causes great church splits. Now, we're going back into ancient time paganism here. They were sacrificing to Baal or Baal. It was part of nature worship, where they would sacrifice their children to Moloch. And what they would do, they would join the priests and temple prostitutes in these sexual orgies to the gods, to appease the gods. They thought that by appeasing the gods, they're going to be able to gain all this fertility. In other words, be able to have good crops, be prosperous. But
sounds to me like it's another ploy by a group of men that are trying to have more sex, and so they tell all the ladies, well, hey, if you want to have good crops, you got to have a lot of sex with us. And it's just another lie straight from the pit, right?
Exactly. And that's why we need some Elijahs to stand up for righteousness, and I believe that's what I'm doing here. You see, the children of Israel rebelled, and they started worshiping Baal. So what we need to do as a church, we need to stand up today and get paganism out of the church.
Now, was Baal the cow god? Or you said something about nature, too. Did it originate as nature and then move into the cow god? What's the story
I think it originated as nature and then moved into the cow god. Because it's almost Jezebel brought in, she was from the land of Phoenicia, and she's the one that brought in Baal worship. She brought in 450 priests of Baal, and then she brought in 400 goddess priests, in other words, to the goddess. So she's the one that brought the god and the goddesses and combined them together. And the children of Israel, after a while, they weren't worshiping God. They were following after all these other idols. 1 Kings 9:18 says, "Yet I have left me 7,000 in Israel, and all the knees which have not bowed unto Baal." This is when Elijah was, after all this time, Elijah, he was afraid of Jezebel. And the Lord said, "What are you doing here?" He says, I still have people that have not bowed their knee to Baal. In other words, I have people that have not turned to paganism. And I believe there's some people today in the church that have not bowed their knee to paganism.
But there's some that have. The whole purposes of your talk is for people to be able to see this paganism. And you're really going to point out that this paganism is in many of the churches. Just off the top of your head, what would you guess the percentage of churches, I'm talking about the good ones, how many of them do have at least a little bit of paganism to some degree?
I say quite the majority, especially of the mainstream denominations, because with the World Council of Churches and all this ecumenicism coming in, this ecumenical movement, it's like no longer that we want to stand up for righteousness, we're going along with the crowd. Whatever pleases the crowd, whatever we can do to bring more people into our church, it looks like it's not about getting people saved, it's about how many people I can get into my church.
Well, we're in the time where people will not endure sound doctrine. And they heap to themselves teachers, they heap to themselves radio hosts and TV hosts that have tickled their ears. In other words, they pay to receive what they like. And this whole ideology of if I like it, I'll send money. If I don't like it, I don't send money, by default allows the flesh into the church, onto radio, onto TV, which is one of the reasons. Matter of fact, I was just talking to Leslie Ann, my daughter, the other day, and we were saying, well, hey, we need to have the money to send out this next magazine. We need to have the money to send out the next newsletter. And we don't have the money. And I turned to her and I said, I'm not going to compromise. I'm not going to begin to tell the people smooth things just so that they'll like me, like the ministry, and send in donations. Now, brothers and sisters, if God were here, if He were actually on the mic, we had Jesus sitting across the table right now, I believe He would say, and that's the kind of ministry you want to support. You don't want to be supporting the ministries that are constantly telling you what you want to hear. It's kind of like a coach. Let's say, for example, you go out for football and your coach says, oh, you guys are so great. No, we don't have to practice all that hard. It's all right. Y'all going to be the greatest. And then you go out and lose the first game.